Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Ambient Bass Effects. And this is by All Bass Creations, of course. So I appreciate you chiming in, hanging out with me on the different platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, um, all the usual. Definitely appreciate the Patreon supporters. You guys are amazing. And make sure, if you haven't already, you go check out the Patreon if you want any of my presets and different things like that. You can, and a lot of these pedals that you're seeing are digital, so things like the MS-70 CDR Plus, the MS-60B Plus, Future Impact 4, Enzo X, ToneX, B6. You don't see the Zoom B6, but all that's on the Patreon. You can check out all that over there. So let's go ahead and do a little explanation here. So to create that sound, I'm pretty much using the Electro Harmonics Hog 2 to do the freeze and the octaves, and I'm using the Key 9 for more of that keyboard sound you're hearing. The choirs coming from the male 9, and let's see what else we got here. We got a color box tone model on the ToneX, and we also running the Empress compressor. MS-70 CDR Plus is handling the delays. X1 Plethora X1 is handling that flanger, and shimmer is coming from the HX1. So you can get a lot of this stuff if you just have like if you have like a OC5 and a deep freeze, you can do something similar to what you can do with the Hog 2. You just won't have access to all the octaves. And then if you want to get that like complete orchestral sound, you want to have that freeze where it's like you can play with that time. I'm controlling that with the expression pedal on the floor. Just using a combination of effects rather than just trying to use one effect at a time. And that's why I always try to stress being creative with the things that you're using, because there are a ton of options for things, if you start making combinations. So I can switch out any of those elements and it'll change that sound up a lot. So if I switch the male 9 to strings, keep everything else the same. So just switching up individual effects, within that, you can change that sound a lot. If I change the way the Hog 2 is shaped as well. too. Oh, and feel free to ask questions, guys, and I'll try to do my best to answer them. I try to do more playing and talking during this time, you know. But make sure you hit that like button for me while you're here. Like I said, and I definitely appreciate it. Subscribe. Make sure you keep up so you know when we doing this, you know. But let's get it popping. So, you start with some. You can take out these octaves and just have the original pitch. Start just building things on top of that. But I'm actually going to go and do something else. But yeah, so that's just how it works, you know what I'm saying? You just you experiment and you figure out what you like and what you don't like and all that good stuff. Let me see what we got here. See what solo sound we're gonna go with here. So this ARP sound is made with the Enzo X. Of course, it's in the preset packs on the Patreon, but you know, that's entirely the Enzo X. The reverb, all of that. That's why I love the Enzo X. You'll find little stuff like this that you just groove out on, you know? And then you just turn it into a little something from there, you know what I'm saying? It don't take a whole lot. So yeah, you just take a little small inspiration like that. This is why I love effects pedals. Like you really can't get to all of these type of sounds without them. You know, and a lot of times people, you know, and it's particularly basses. I don't know. This is one thing basses got to get out of that habit of. I like when my bass sound like a bass. That's nice for you. But what about everybody else? What about the people that got to listen to you? What about writing the entire song other than just the bass line? Like that. This is why effects pedals are really great tools for a lot of musicians, a lot of bassists, a lot of guitarists, because it allows us to get into different spaces the same way it does for a piano. You know, a keyboard doesn't just have a piano sound in it, doesn't just have an organ sound. It has bass guitar sounds, bass synth sounds, regular synth sounds, pads, everything you could think of, horn sounds, all that stuff in there. But somehow it gets to us, and then we feel like we don't need to make any other sounds or try to, you know, get into the space of another instrument. And we get into that space so we can learn and so we can also write. It's not like we always live in that space. When I'm on the, you know, my bass gigs, I'm playing bass. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. But, you know, when I have my own gigs and I'm doing my own compositions, or I may be just, you know, it also makes you keep the instrument in your hand too a little longer when you use different effects. What's going on, folks? Let me get appreciate everybody that's been chiming in. Appreciate you guys. But you know, it takes some getting used to, in terms of, you know, you have to operate like other instruments. Like when I'm soloing, I don't appreciate you chiming in on Facebook. But it's when I'm composing, I'm not thinking bass. I'm thinking composing. I'm thinking, what does the entire song need? Or, you know, little things, like I said, like that can spark a whole entire song for you, or just a groove, but you never know. A lot of those grooves end up being some of the biggest songs and things like that. So, without having the tools to inspire yourself continually, sometimes you can find yourself getting a little bored with bass. I also play other instruments. I grew up playing 11 different instruments growing up. I still play bass, piano, and drums. So I've never really just done bass. Like bass was actually the last instrument I learned, and so because of that, I grew up in orchestras, like playing saxophone, trombone, tuba, um, clarinet, flute, all that stuff in different orchestras and different things growing up. Of course, I played in church, played organ, piano, bass, all that stuff, drums in church. So growing up with all of that, and then you want me to just be stuck to a one sound of an instrument, even though I can do a ton with a bass, anybody that knows me know I can do a ton with a bass sound. But I can't get that sound. There's nothing I can do with my bass by itself that's going to give me anything close to that. And now, I could play that with a bass sound, but that sounds fire. A hog too, I love the hog too. This is like one of the best octavers ever. If you could find one of these used, like for like 300, man, you get that joint. 250, 300. Try to make sure it's got this foot switch with it as well. That'll have your presets, but it's such a useful tool. Let's make something out of that. We ain't doing nothing else. Sure, why not? Let's go ahead and turn that into something. See, just little slight inspirations. You don't need it. It don't take a whole lot. And a lot of times, just let yourself be inspired. Don't try to always. I don't try to write difficult things. I write a lot of difficult songs, but you guys don't. On this stream, I'm just doing a lot of grooves and stuff, but you can check out the rest of my music. It's not always the easiest thing in the world to play, but just in general, I also would recommend this. As you get more skills, you're going to be tempted to only try to write your most complicated things. Don't forget about those simple ideas. Just the simple. Sometimes will inspire you. I messed that one up, but that's okay. That's why we have a looper. Niggas actually I want to keep that faster. A little faster than that. Yeah, that's good. All right. Let's pick a bass sound. One thing that helps when you're looping, you're going to keep in mind that you're going to layer this with other stuff. So, a part like that wouldn't be the loudest part in a groove in a song. So Try to keep that within reason. Let's find a nice little bass synth. Rock with us. Session. Ah. Gotta remember the stupid bass line. Come on. It just takes a small idea to spark something. Don't take a whole lot, just a small idea. And you just develop around it. And like I said, there's other things that I do. The majority of songs that I actually make it to the album, a lot of times are more difficult than a song like that. But, just jamming out, just hanging out with your boys or something, a jam like that is easy for everybody to get to and get going without a whole bunch of hassle or reading chord charts and everything else, But, the complicated music definitely comes. I just don't, one thing I get in the habit of is not overcomplicating things when I'm writing them. Either it is or it ain't when I'm writing it, So, prime example of something like that would be like my first album, All Bass Creations, which is available on Bandcamp. If you haven't seen it or heard it, check it out. Let's see what we got in these. I appreciate that. Got the usual suspects in the house, near a few others as well. Thank you guys for always, y'all showing up. Y'all definitely supporting. I appreciate it always. I don't take for granted that people spend time checking out my stuff. Oh, yeah, I could play Thunderstruck. Thunderstruck just costs $300. Every time any song requests are $300, feel free to send me the money and you can get your request. Otherwise, I'm sticking to the topic of the live. So, yeah, with ambient bass effects, they come in different forms. It's similar to the ones on guitar, but, I like to have things that are a little bit more, especially with the modulations, a little bit more bass specific. I like them to still, like, for instance, when I turn on... Oh, there you go. What else I got on? Oh, thanks. How wide that is, That's without it, with it. It just adds so much width to it, but doesn't take away if I wanted to play just straight up bass with it. You're gonna get all that bass work with it too. It almost gets addictive playing with it, like, to be honest. That little part, I arrange that. I always have to remember my own arrangements. if you haven't ever heard of Glide, it's a nice, very nice bass line to that joint. That's one of the OG classics of great bass lines right there. Glide, nice funk tune. But let me see. Yeah, the Bandcamp probably isn't in the description anywhere because it's on the screen, a lot of the times. And, I really, I focus on getting you guys to go over to the Bandcamp because that's when when I start going on tour and doing shows and stuff again because I've been slacking up on my solo shows. But when I start doing those shows again, I want to be able to contact you guys, and I'd rather have you go to the Bandcamp than you can you can always type in allbasscreations.bandcamp, and but I know people like to just be able to click on it. I know. See? It just makes you want to play. Like, I just made that up. I just made that up literally just off the top of my head. It was like, let me just play these little chord sequence with arpeggios using the slap technique because that certain modulations really make you, cause it surrounds, especially when you got on headphones, it like surrounds you. It does like this, compared to before, when you play without it. And that's just a tri-chorus on the Plethora X1. The one on the MS-70 CDR Plus is on there as well. It's on the tri-chorus is on there. A good one is on there. But if you got the original, or the original by the original company, why not? But yeah, a good modulation doesn't just like add the chorusing sound. It fills out the space. That's why I prefer to run my board stereo when I can. Because that's what you're hearing it in now. You're hearing it in stereo, full stereo. You add that with the color box and the Gens Bend Shuttle 9.0 tone model. Just that little bit of breakup. So sometimes I get stuck on a line too. Just, it's a lot of it, I was jazz crimes. But like I said, it just a good effect in general, I think, just makes you want to play more. It's not even just modulation effects, but especially modulation effects on bass. Because you take something like that's actually the tri-chorus on the MS-70 CDR Plus. See what I'm saying? Don't sleep on that Zoom MS-60CDR Plus. It's got all the modulation, delays, and reverbs and stuff you need on there. It's nasty. So that's what I'm saying. The MS-70CDR Plus is just insane. Like that's the MXR bass flanger emulation on there. The D-Tune. I love the D-Tune chorus, especially for synth stuff. So, you know, that then the warp phaser, especially for bass stuff. So even that warp phaser is their original phaser, one of their original effects. And this is absolutely my favorite phaser. But as you can tell, that MS-70 Plus definitely will add a lot to your overall sound, your overall capabilities. In terms of what is immediately available to you. You know what I'm saying? It's insane. It shouldn't even be. I'm not even sure why it's so good, but it is. I wish they would make a higher quality one like they did with the Zoom B6. The Zoom B6 has twice the sample rate of the multi-stomp, so that if I could I would love to hear these coming out of the Zoom B6. These effects, and I mean in stereo like this. In the Zoom B6, in case you didn't know, out of that main output that's next to the XLR, if you put in a TRS to TS, two TS cables, basically a splitter, you can turn that into stereo. So your B6 actually is in stereo. You just gotta know how to get it out of there. So. But yeah, so it's been amazing just hanging with you guys. Doing these ambient bass effects mornings and afternoons. So make sure you hit that like button for me if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you come check out the rest of my videos, the rest of my music. Go to the Bandcamp. It's on the screen. Allbasscreations.bandcamp. Check out the Patreon. If you want the presets or you want to support the channel long term. And if you feel like it, Cash App, Super Chat, all that stuff is available. But I definitely appreciate you guys. Always appreciate the support and the love you guys show. So thank you so much. But this has been another episode of All Bass Creations, Ambient Bass Effects Morning. I am the Bass Negus, Negus. You can catch me on all social media platforms at the Bass Negus. And I will catch you guys later. Peace.